For our first session, we are lucky enough to be joined by the Honourable Rachel Brooking, Associate Minister for the Environment. First, we will hear the Minister outline her local government priorities ahead of this year's election, and then Simon Watts MP, spokesperson for climate change and local government, and Associate Spokesperson for Infrastructure for the New Zealand National Party, will follow her up to provide us with an overview of the opposition's priorities. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to announce the Honourable Rachel Brooking, Associate Minister for the Environment. Rachel is the Associate Minister for the Environment, the Minister for Oceans and Fisheries, the Minister for Food Safety, and Associate Minister for Immigration. She is an environmental and local government expert, company director, working mum, and lover of New Zealand fashion. Rachel has 20 years' experience as a resource management and local government lawyer. She understands business, the community, the environment, and good governance. In private practice, Rachel's clients included tourism, business, councils, iwi, university, and infrastructure projects. Her work for the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment gave her a grounding in policy. Welcome, Minister.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all today, and thank you, Nicola Robbins, for your introduction. As has just been said, I'm the Minister of Oceans and Fisheries and of Food Safety, and an Associate Minister of Immigration. I'm also the Associate Minister for the Environment, responsible for waste issues. So on the surface there, not much about infrastructure, but in another life, I was a resource management and local government lawyer and was knee-deep in the things you're about today. I worked on consenting and procurement of drinking water takes, roads, wastewater disposal, hydro schemes, upzoning, coastal protection, and more, mostly advocating for infrastructure and often regulating and sometimes opposing. That's the life of a lawyer. So when I heard that Local Government Minister Kieran McAnulty couldn't make it to your conference, I of course was only too pleased to say I'd stand in for him. So that is what I'm doing today. First, I'd like to say thank you for the critical work you undertake for the communities throughout New Zealand. I'd also like to acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues who will be around the conference at some point today. I've seen Camilla Bellich, Honourable Julian Genter, Chris Bishop, Simon Court, and of course Simon Watts, who you'll be hearing from after me. And I know that Infrastructure Minister Megan Woods joined you yesterday, and the Prime Minister was here by video message. I'm going to start on local government reform, and this is in part because what was asked for Minister McAnulty to speak about, so I'm going to touch on a number of things which of course include water. So the Independent Future for Local Government Review was established in April 2021 in response to the sector's call for a program of work to reimagine the role and function of local government, to build a sustainable system that enhances the well-being of communities. And the review panel presented its draft report in October last year. Strong themes reflected in the draft report, including improving iwi council relations, enabling citizen-led democracy, representation, and the need to address long-standing funding and financing issues. These were also issues the government heard during engagement with councils last year. The submissions on the draft report closed at the end of February, and the review panel received more than 14,000 submissions on the draft report, and they will strongly inform the final report. It will also include answers to some of the questions raised in the report and more concrete recommendations for the future of local government. But I do want to repeat what former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said in her message, was that government will not embark on further substantial reform of local government or governance unless it is sought by the sector with broad consensus about the need for and the direction of change. And this aligns with the review having been requested by the sector. The review's final report is due to be released on the 19th of June this year, and then it will come to the government for consideration. I want to touch on our water services reform, which I know is significant for you, this conference, and our communities. Earlier this year, Minister Kieran McAnulty worked with local government on reviewing the reforms. And I'm glad to say that the message we repeatedly heard was that change to water services must happen. And let me be clear, stopping the water reform was never an option. Everyone in this room understands our water infrastructure deficit needs to be addressed now. The cost of meeting the upgrades we need is projected to be up of $185 billion over the next 30 years. That level of required investment is outside the reach of most individual councils to go it alone. If we do nothing, it means households face increased water costs and ratepayers will be faced with an unaffordable cost burden. We listened to what people were telling us, and in April we announced changes to the water reform. Throughout this process, we have not changed our bottom lines, being public ownership of water services entities, balance sheet separation or operational and financial independence to allow the entities to make much needed investment, joint oversight of the entities by their local authority owners and mana whenua, and strong regulation of the water services entities to ensure fair prices for consumers and quality of service. So what does the reform look like now? Cabinet has agreed to establish 10 new regionally led water service entities. The government believes it is important these entities have clear, strong links to their communities, so New Zealanders have confidence they will listen and respond to their needs. Having 10 entities based more closely around existing regions and regional councils enables them to be better connected to the communities they serve and strengthens local representation and influence. 10 entities will still deliver significant cost savings to New Zealand households. The entities continue to be owned by local councils on behalf of the public. Each will be run by a professional board, and appointments to those boards will be based on competency and skill. The ability for local voices to be heard has been enhanced through regional partnership via the Regional Representative Group. Under the 10 entity model, every territorial authority owner, and therefore every community, will be represented on the Regional Representative Group. Mana whenua will be represented alongside councils at Regional Representative Group levels in a 50-50 partnership to provide strategic oversight and direction. The water services entities will start delivering water services in a staggered manner from early 2025 to 1 July 2026 at the latest. There may be potential for some entities to be ready to start operating early, such as from 1 July 2024, if they are ready. The Water Services Reform National Transition Unit, or NTU, is currently working on guidance for local councils on how and when the transfer to the new entity will work in practice. Councils will continue to be responsible for water services until the handover date for their entity. The government intends to pass all legislation to give effect to the water reforms before the election. This includes the introduction of a further amendment bill to give effect to the changes announced in April. This legislation will include arrangements that modify council long-term planning and reporting obligations relating to water services in a way that minimises what will be required while maintaining transparency to communities. This will be subject to the parliamentary timetable and processes and include an opportunity for public feedback. The Water Services Legislation Bill and the Water Services Economic Efficiency and Consumer Protection Bill continue to progress through Parliament on its current timetable. The Finance and Expenditure Committee is scheduled to report back to Parliament on both those bills today. The NTU is resetting the Water Services Reform Program alongside the legislative process. The focus is obviously on providing a seamless transition for all 10 water services entities to enable communities to gain the full benefits of the water reforms from day one. We recognise that having certainty around the legislative process, transition plan and timelines is needed for water sector planning and employment, and to provide everyone with clarity about the path ahead. So more detail will be provided in the coming months. The need for investment in our water services is increasing. The extreme weather we've experienced this year, including flooding in northern parts of our country and the Cyclone Gabrielle, are a taste of what's coming. We are all too aware of how fragile our water infrastructure is in some areas. These events highlight how critical robust water services are for community resilience. We need to be ready. Water services reform is long overdue and represents a unique chance to make a real difference to New Zealand for today and for our future. Now, turning to a topic very close to my heart, resource management reforms. Officials at the Department of Internal Affairs are working closely with the Ministry for the Environment to make sure the planned water services delivery and resource management systems are aligned. The RMA is being replaced by the Natural and Built Environment Act, and part of the reform is the requirement for long-term spatial plans at the regional scale via the Spatial Planning Act. Work is underway to integrate water services entities into the proposed spatial planning regime. Select committees are scheduled to report back on all these pieces of draft legislation to the House this month, and they will all be passed before the election. Aligning the Water Services Legislation Bill and the Resource Management Reform Bills will continue through the Committee of the Whole House stage and will help build a streamlined and efficient resource management system. The Department of Internal Affairs is also participating in the other aspects of the resource management reform led by the Ministry for the Environment. These include representing local government interests in the development of the National Planning Framework and formation of the first regional planning committees. New Zealand has not been good at aligning infrastructure development with town planning. Part of the problem has been central government having many, sometimes conflicting interests. To address these government silos, the spatial plan will have a central government representative on the relevant regional planning committees to coordinate government plans around infrastructure like schools and hospitals and feed into that town planning process. The Spatial Planning Act also links to the Land Transport Act and the Local Government Act, and also required to be consistent with the National Adaptation Plan and emissions reduction plans that are made under the Climate Response Act. The third leg to the RMA reforms is the Climate Adaptation Act to address existing activities that are affected by climate change. Work on that bill is progressing, but it has not yet been introduced to Parliament. I'd also pause to note that part of the RMA reform and those new bills that will become acts soon that I've talked about do give stronger emphasis to avoiding hazards. And that leads me to talk about Cyclone Gabrielle. The cost of recovery from Cyclone Gabrielle is uncertain and will take time to assess. Communities have different levels of ability when it comes to paying for the cost of recovery. Early estimates come with a high degree of uncertainty, and because councils have yet to address all damages, there is a risk that costs are being underestimated. Based on discussions with councils, it's likely to be another 2 or 3 months before comprehensive estimates will be available. I want to highlight some important work announced this month. The Budget 2023 Flood and Cyclone Recovery Package will boost resilience against future extreme weather events with an investment of $100 million in flood protection. The government is also setting aside $6 billion to build back better with greater resilience to protect New Zealanders from increasingly severe and unpredictable weather events. Local leadership is a key feature of the recovery efforts, and the government is doing everything it can to support that. There are longer-term decisions to be made on the recovery that will intersect with climate change considerations. Central and local government will work closely on those. The long-term well-being of communities and future resilience are very important considerations for any investment. I want to acknowledge that there is much to be done in the local government space, and the work will take time and dedication with both central and local, which both central and local government have. It is crucial that we get this right and ensure that all who live in New Zealand now and in the future benefit from the changes being made. So thank you for having me. And I note I've got 6 minutes left on the clock, and I'll hand back to Nicola, but I just want to say before I depart that I am going to be running away because I have to get back to the house for 2 o'clock. And Simon, who is here as well, he's got a little bit more space to play with. So thank you.
Now, I think we do have time for just a couple of questions, if that's all right. Regarding water reform, what can industry do to help change the public domain narrative from what am I losing to what can we gain?
Yeah, well, I think anything that you can do to tell the public about the state of current water infrastructure is helpful, and the importance of that infrastructure, and how it's complicated and does need a lot of funding, because the whole purpose of these reforms is to enable that infrastructure to be upgraded. So any focus on that, I think, is very helpful.
And another question, National supports CCOs, which are still tied to council balance sheets who cannot afford to fund our Three Waters infrastructure deficit. Are CCOs a realistic solution?
No, I don't think so. And of course, that was looked at very early on, because obviously a number of councils have CCOs that do work with their water infrastructure. And I've just recently been made a minister, and before that I was chairing the Finance and Expenditure Select Committee, and also before that subbing into the Select Committee to hear submissions on these bills. And I acknowledge Simon, who's sitting out there, who you'll see in a minute, he's also on that Select Committee. So we did hear from the CCOs, and Wellington Water in particular were strongly saying that they wanted more than a CCO, and of course that CCO issue doesn't address the balance sheet separation issue.
And a topic that's come up a couple of times over this conference, since both Labor and National agree reform is vital, are the parties willing to work together to provide much needed certainty for the sector?
Of course. I say, he's not even looking. And Simon's just out the back there, who I can see and none of you can. Look, I don't want to speak too much on behalf of the ministers who actually lead this work. It's not me. But we absolutely want certainty, and I believe briefings and discussions have been available to other parties. And certainly, again, he's still not looking, the work on the Select Committee that I was involved with was very constructive.
Thanks so much, Minister. I think we'll release you to the House now.
Great.
Can we have another round of applause for the Honourable Rachel Brooking?
Thanks.
I would now like to introduce Simon Watts, National Spokesperson for Local Government. Simon Watts was elected as the Member of Parliament for North Shore in the 2020 election. He is the National Party spokesperson for climate change, local government, regional development, statistics, and associate spokesperson for finance and infrastructure. Simon grew up in the Waikato, where his family were farmers and orchardists. He is married and has 2 sons. Can we please welcome Simon?
Thanks very much. Well, look, a very good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all here at the local government session. I always know that this is a dedicated crowd. And what an opportunity to be able to have a bit of chat around some of the key issues that are facing the local government sector, because by golly, aren't there a few? The local government sector has borne the brunt of a significant amount of reform and impact, particularly over the last 5 years. But firstly, I want to acknowledge, as I spoke this morning, in regards to the role in which local government and our leaders within local government have contributed and played a significant role in regards to dealing with the impacts of significant weather events and natural disasters across our country. The role in which our leadership in local government and their teams and contractors and those that support them have done a significant job in regards to getting our communities back on track and providing the support in which is required under what have been very, very difficult circumstances. And so I acknowledge that work, and for many in this room who are contractors and consultants and work in private sector that support that sector. We're damn lucky to have had some of those people across the country playing such a significant role and leadership role. And the challenge really is that we're going to see more. of that adverse impact around weather events and climate change. And so the ability for us as government to establish appropriate frameworks around ensuring that we have a pathway to deal and manage with what is going to be more frequent weather events is a significant area of focus for National. A National-led government on October 15th will ensure that we have a high-quality local government sector that is financially sustainable. It is significantly important for us as a party to have a strong and financially sustainable local government sector. We have no ability in order to deliver the scale of turnaround required in this country if we are not working together between central government and local government in order to achieve our ambitions and our goals as a country. The ability to deliver resilient infrastructure is absolutely intrinsically linked to the capability and competence of those that lie within our local communities. And it is very much our vision to ensure that any policy response that we put in place works with local government, not against it, and ensures that that sector is high quality and is financially sustainable. I want to cover four key areas this morning, and then we might have a little bit of time for Q&A, and happy to do that. But the four key pillars of focus in local government sector firstly relate to Three Waters. We've heard and acknowledged the Honourable Minister for her comments, Rachel Brooking, for her comments before. Rachel and I both came into Parliament at the same time. We're the class of 2020, so we are first term MPs. But the difference between National's policy around Three Waters, which is local water done well, and the government's policy is significantly different. Is four key aspects in regards to that. We've been very clear from the outset that we do not support the centralisation, the creation of mega bureaucratic entities. So within the first 100 days of a National-led government, we will repeal that legislation. We are committed to that. The second aspect of our plan is that we will restore local council ownership and control of water assets. Local communities and local council and local government are best placed to deal with local issues. The challenge that sits in front of them relate to a couple of elements, particularly around funding and financing, and I'll come to that subsequently. But it is very much our view that we need to support our local communities in order to deliver that water infrastructure conversation. The benefits that can be derived in regards to taking us from the status quo to a new model around water infrastructure primarily come from the introduction of economic regulation. It is our view that economic regulation and the implementation of economic regulation is a critical success factor and pathway in order for us to move from the current model and status quo to a model in which we have an efficient water infrastructure model for generations ahead. And we have supported the water quality regulator, Te Mata Arawai, which ensures that what comes out of the tap is healthy to drink. I think all Kiwis will acknowledge that having the water quality regulator has been a sensible development and a sensible area of reform, and National have supported that element around regulation. But it is the economic regulation component that we see as the core success factor that will take us from where we are to where we need to be. We have precedent in regards to the electricity sector of where economic regulation has provided significant benefits in terms of ensuring that the appropriate degree of investment is made within that sector in terms of making sure that the pricing for water infrastructure is fair and equitable, ensuring that the underlying asset management plans and long-term infrastructure plans for water infrastructure are in place, and that is balanced and not gold-plated in regards to the underlying water quality regulation that is in play. But also the role of an economic regulator to work with local government, not against it, in terms of supporting them around the requirement for them to be financially sustainable. And it is without doubt that across the country that we have significant degrees of geographic variation in terms of the state of our infrastructure. All political parties are aligned with the need that we need to improve water infrastructure. The pathway in order in terms of how we get there differs, but it is our view that a combination of locally managed and operated water infrastructure combined with central regulation and economic regulation and water quality regulation, and a requirement for entities to be financially sustainable is the pathway in which best sets us up for success. When we talk about financial sustainability, 90% of the conversation that I have as I move around the country and talk with local government is in regards to funding and financing. And we've been very clear to acknowledge that not everyone is at the same starting point or at the same point on the starting line. We acknowledge that some councils have challenges around low rating base, or low numbers of people within their area, and therefore revenue is a significant issue. We know that some councils have significant geographical areas with small populations, and that is a major issue. We know in our biggest urban cities, in Auckland, the challenges around the ability for the entities which are in play to be able to borrow long term in order to match the asset life of the pipes in which they're placing in the ground is a significant issue. But we do not see that one size fits all in regards to how we deal and come up with solutions across this country. We have committed to work with those local government entities to come up with a plan that ensures their financial sustainability. It acknowledges us that in order to achieve that in some parts of the country, there will be a fiscal gap, and it is a commitment of a national-led government to work with those councils in order to close that fiscal gap. Why? Because it is important that our local government sector have certainty in regards to the pipeline ahead, and certainty in regards to funding and financing is critically important. All options are on the table. There are no sacred cows. There is nothing that is off the table in regards to our ability to achieve financial sustainability for our local government sector. And so we will work collaboratively with those entities to make that happen. If they want to work together as like-minded councils and form structures and other entities such as council-controlled organisations, great. We will not dictate the structure in which they need to operate under. How local government want to work and engage with Māori and iwi is a decision for local government. It is not a decision that will be mandated from Wellington under a national-led government. Actually, in the main, the majority of councils have very good and existing relationships, and it is our role sometimes to get out of the way and allow and empower our local government sector to do what needed to be done. Infrastructure and long-term infrastructure investment pipeline. Christopher Luxon announced our 5-point plan around infrastructure yesterday. The component around a rolling 30-year program of infrastructure applies to water as it does any other infrastructure bucket. The implementation around a model around city regional deals provides a framework in order to how do we take that list of projects that sits on a long-term plan and put that into action. If you ask most people in local government, most people out in the foyer of this conference, most people on the street, the frustration and challenge is a list is nice, but we need to get stuff done. We need a mechanism in order to achieve and deliver this change. And so the framework in which we have articulated on the table yesterday is the how we will do this. And that, in our view, is a critical element of that pathway of moving from a list to a mechanism that delivers these mega projects, of which water is a key component, and does that over a time-bound 10-year window, 10-year procurement, 10-year funding, definition of projects. Within each of those projects, there's mechanisms for different funding and financing of those. But at the end of the day, if anything, we have a degree of certainty around what we will do over the next decade by every region, city and province in this country. And that will get us out of the blocks in terms of certainty to be able to start moving forward and planning forward for the future. Because the number one issue beyond funding and financing when you get around the country is workforce. I mean, most of the councils, the number one issue that sits in front of a mayor is the fact that they've got a large number of vacancies. They're losing highly technical staff to other central government entities often for a 30 or 40% premium on salary. And we've got a capability and competence challenge in our local communities. And so the ability for us to provide certainty around large-scale mega infrastructure projects provides that certainty for people to know that actually, you know, their ability to invest within and stay within their communities and build up capability and competence is a key aspect. We've also heard a little bit around housing and RMA. I'll be frank with you, and it's not just us, the current government's reforms around RMA are going to make things worse, not better. And it is not just a politician standing up in front of you to say that. Wind Energy New Zealand Association, quote, the current government's reforms will make it more difficult to build wind farms. CEO of Contact Energy, kiss goodbye to our decarbonisation goals. The industry are very clear in regards to their pushback around this, and the difference and the challenges is that, you know, after 5 or 6 years, the reform on the table, in our view, will make things worse, not better. National will create a framework that removes and reduces the barriers in regards to consenting to allow us to get on and build infrastructure. We need more infrastructure, not less. And the current reform program on the table is not going to achieve that outcome. Housing is also a key component within local government. It is an area often of significant challenge, going back to the drivers around fiscal and financing. The ability to do upfront infrastructure enablement works to enable housing to occur is a key barrier, particularly when that is the only funding mechanism available to councils is through rates. And so National have outlined housing policy under Chris Bishop, who's our housing and infrastructure spokesperson. It indicates that we will be extending the urban boundary. We will be ensuring that we are, in effect, zoning for housing growth for the next 30 years. The number one issue around housing affordability is the cost of land. So we need to do something about it. It is not appropriate that young people do not have the ability financially to be able to own their own home in a future New Zealand. But that is the case for many young people today. And the key constraint is the price of land. And so our policy deals with that component. But importantly, for a local government aspect, we've got the provision of $1 billion of funding that provides a bolus of capital to councils once they meet certain thresholds around growth to help fund the underlying enablement infrastructure that they require to enable that housing to occur. We are not sitting in Wellington thinking that this can just occur and these costs can come from baseline funding. There is a need for central government to contribute to enable our cities and our urban areas and our provinces to grow. So that is another area of policy that we've outlined. The Future for Local Government review is due for a report back, as I understand, probably in 3 to 4 weeks. I'll be frank, we've been very disappointed to date with the recommendations. It doesn't deal with the core underlying issues in regards to the inputs and the outputs of a sector. We believe that local government as a sector is actually struggling under the burden of significant reform. One of the biggest issues that most local government people will say is, if you do nothing, Simon, actually just not introducing more reform would be a significant step forward in the next 5 years. And so we hear that. And so in regards to the degree of recommendations, and we've been very collegial with the group undertaking the review. If there is sensible recommendations, of course, we will look at those and look to implement those. But we do not see that we want to be distracted by ideological pet projects within that reform program. We need to deal with the core issues and barriers that are holding local government back from being able to deliver core services. And we need to focus on those problems and come up with solutions and be willing and bold enough to discuss the difficult issues. We must discuss the difficult issues, particularly around funding and financing of this sector as we move forward. And simply ignoring that is not a sustainable mechanism as we move forward. I'll end around the City and Regional Deal Framework, which was outlined and announced yesterday by Christopher Luxon in regards to our 5-point plan for infrastructure. This is a transformational game change in terms of a structural mechanism to deliver infrastructure in this country. It is our belief, based on the work that has been done in both the UK and Australia, that if we take the best of breed of what has been learnt by both those jurisdictions in regards to utilising this framework to deliver mega infrastructure projects, that this will enable us to get out of the blocks and create that sustainable pipeline of infrastructure that will unlock economic growth, that will unlock productivity, that will increase jobs. Those are the drivers in terms of what we require and we need from infrastructure to enable and unlock the opportunities that we have in this country. And gee, do we have a significant amount of opportunities as a country? We are blessed, as I outlined this morning, around our ability to access and generate more renewable energy, a significant competitive advantage over other countries and including our neighbours very close to us. So we must unlock these opportunities. And a mechanism and a framework in terms of how we do that is a key element and a key role that government and central government can do. But that has to be a collaborative partnership between central government, local government, the private sector, Māori iwi, and community organisations. Depending on the type of mega infrastructure project will depend what voices are around the table. But it cannot be a hierarchical model of adult-child between central government and other partners around the table. We need to level up that relationship, play to our strengths of what we all bring respectively to that table, but identify where the blockages are and get on and do the doing. Because the appetite for more talk and no action is gone. Kiwis, rightly so, are frustrated. They want to see change, they want to see action, and our policies around outlining how we will undertake that change, in our view, will be is a positive indication of the work that we've been doing and the listening that we've been doing with the sector across the country. So I'm very excited about what the future holds. I look forward in regards to the policy that we have in regards to local water done well to deal with water infrastructure, our housing policy to unlock growth, our RMA reforms which remove the barriers of red tape to allow us to build infrastructure that will unlock economic potential in this country, the opportunity to look at opportunities to reform and improve the local government sector. And when I refer to that, I refer to the levelling up. 90% of tax revenue goes to central government, 10% goes to local government. We wonder why the appetite for voter turnout in local government is so low. If people don't physically see local government being able to make a change in their lives, then the ability to interact and the motivation to interact with local government is what it is. So I see and we see an opportunity to level up that relationship. And Wellington should not have a monopoly on the delivery of public services. Yeah, the revenue may flow, but actually we need to be thinking about what is the best way in order to achieve the outcomes in this country. And it is our view that we need to do that in partnership with local government, and in many areas they are best placed to do that. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm out of time. I hope you found that session useful and I look forward to further conversation. Thank you.